Good morning, good morning, good morning. You know what today is? It's Monday morning chats with Sack, and Sack is me. I hope that you guys had a great, amazing weekend. Honestly, I had a good weekend. I just had a good week. I always have good weeks because I make the decision to just have fun. And my fun is defined, it may be defined differently than you guys. You know, a Saturday of fun for me may be just to stay in, look at Netflix, have crabs. But this weekend I was out, so that was always fun. Always fun to hang out with my friends and my cousins, and I just had a good time. I also want to give a shout out for those that pretty much supported me when I was on TV this past Friday. And honestly, that was just an opportunity that just fell in my lap. I got a call Thursday night saying hey, you're going to be on TV at 1 p.m., so clear your schedule. And I was like, what? And this is all about the relationships that I have with people. And I just truly believe we are better together. I believe in building healthy, sustainable relationships. And that came from a relationship that I had with one of my close friends. We went to the same law school, and we've been friends ever since 2012. And we just kept our relationship going. So I think out of all the topics that I discussed, I think this is one of my favorites. And these are things I talk about to my friends, or if we have ladies night, we talk about these things. So I took some notes, and as you see behind me, this is my actual my vision board that I created at the beginning of this year. And it talks about being confident, owning who you are, knowing that you're beautiful, claiming that you're beautiful, and believing in love. Love is everything. That's for me. I believe that we are better together. I believe in healthy relationships. I believe in happiness. Your happiness should come within. You shouldn't wait for somebody else to make you happy. You need to do the things that you need to do to make yourself happy. If your happiness is dependent upon somebody else, then you need to figure out what happiness is. So there's a few things I talked about. And most of these things that I decide to talk about for Monday morning chats, most times it usually stems from a conversation that I had with somebody, and we could talk about various things, and certain things come up, and I'm like, oh, I think I should have a chat about this, or just looking at TV and looking at things, and I'll think, well, does this relate to my life? And just to let you guys know, anything I say, it's all real. It's not for the gram. I'm not doing this stuff for the gram. These are all things about me, my real life experiences. This is not saying, hypothetically speaking. No, this is my life. So the first thing I want to talk about is the things that I had to unlearn, and just learning how to appreciate the life that God has given to me. My life is my life. I'm appreciative of my life. I'm appreciative of the choices I made, whether they were good or bad, and just learning how to just roll with the punches and just say, hey, you know what? The things that I've done, it could either make me bitter or make me better, and I could just move forward. So this past weekend, I went to the Wine Fest. Let me say, it was so dope. It was so much fun. And we just had a deep conversation about two-parent households and what does that mean. And so growing up, my mom and dad separated. I think I was 4 or 5. They separated. And we lived in Philly. My dad lived in New Jersey. And so we would go to his house every other weekend, and that was just our life. Go to our dad's house every other weekend. The holidays were split. Sometime we'll go to my dad's house for this holiday, go to my mom's house. And, as a child, and me and my brothers, we would talk about this, and we will always say, why can't we have both our parents in the same house? Why can't we have that? We want our mom and dad in the same house. And we actually talked about this Saturday. And the one thing that I realized is that just because it's a two-parent household, it doesn't mean that it's the best for the parents, and it doesn't mean that it's the best for the kids. Sometimes you look at pictures and you think, oh, mom and dad is in the picture. This picture looks perfect. But if you look in the household, you realize, hey, there's a lot of dysfunction. And honestly, they are better not being together. But I didn't understand it as a child. It was this thing hey, I want my mom and dad to be together no matter what. I want my mom and dad to be together. I want to wake up for Christmas and see my mom and dad. When it's time to go to a play or something I'm a part of, I want my mom and dad to come together in the same car and we go back home. being able to have Sunday dinner with my mom and dad at the table. And I didn't really have that. And so I thought because the other kids that I was friends with, they had that, I thought their life was better than ours. And it wasn't until I got older I realized, like, hey, they were still going through stuff, but they just had two parents in the household. And the one thing that I respect, and as I got older, I appreciate my mom leaving my dad. Like, that's something that I appreciate. And I told my mom, I was like, I don't know how you did it, but I respect you for that, and I appreciate you for that, because you made a decision not just for us, but for you. And because of that, that allowed you to be a better mother to us. So I respect that, and I appreciate you for that, and I love you for that. But going deep down, like the two-parent households, I just had this idea, like if mom and dad was in the house, like you have a better life. Like, you know, it's two incomes there. Like everything is just so much better because mom and dad is in the house. But as I got older, I started realizing, like, hey, they got some shit with them. And I would see this from my friends. And I had a friend where mom and dad lived in a house, but mom and dad were both cheating on each other. Dad had a girlfriend, mom had a boyfriend, but they were just together just to pay bills and to appear to have this perfect life, to appear that everything was good. Like everything was good because mom and dad was in the house. And eventually they got a divorce. But for me, I just thought like hey, like if there's two parents in the household, like that's fine. Like that's fine. You just work it out or whatever. And some things I realized it just can't work out. And then as I got older too, not even just with two-parent households, one of the biggest things that I realized is that, you know, just because you didn't come from that, it doesn't mean that you can't create it for yourself. Like, just because I didn't come from that doesn't mean I can't create it for myself. And just because I had different experiences, I can create my own experiences when it comes to the things I want. And I realized, like, hey, I have to be more specific with my prayers and say, hey, I don't just want, you know, a marriage or, you know, a two-parent household. I want to make sure that myself and my future spouse, we're both mentally healthy. We know the importance of therapy. We know the importance of communicating with each other and making sure that we're set on the things that we want from each other, our wants and our needs. And I'm not saying that I want this perfect relationship, no, because I'm far from perfect, and I don't expect somebody else to be perfect. But just having that dialogue. And I would see some families where they would come in the house and not say anything to each other, like just not say anything. But I just thought just because it was two parents in the household, that was it. And I got to this, I just thought about it and realized, like, hey, you know, just because you come from a single parent household, that doesn't mean your life was not as great as somebody else that came from a two-parent household. And you have to realize that sometimes parents do the best thing, not just for the kids, but for themselves. And just imagine if some mothers or some fathers, because some fathers do leave, let's say they just decide to stay for the kids, they will be miserable. And that would affect how they parent you or anybody else that you know that has similar situations. And I just started thinking about, like, you know, abuse, you know, someone that's involved in a domestic violence relationship. And I remember when I was younger, you know, I would see this in middle school. Like, I would see this where my school, it was K through 12. And so for the middle school, we was on the second floor. Well, technically, it was the third floor. It was on the third floor. One side of our school was the 7th, 8th graders. And then the other side was the high school. And so it was cool for the middle schoolers to date some of the high schoolers. Like, that was a cool thing. Or sometimes you would date somebody that wasn't in your school. And I remember, like, sometime, like, I would go to the girls' bathroom, and I would see some girls, like, with black eyes. Like, they're, like, using, like, concealer to, like, you know, hide it. But it was, like, black and blue. Like, I would see this. And I remember, like, seeing this in my family, like, you know, seeing some women, like, go through that. I'm like, well, damn, like, why did they stay? And for me, I host my family reunions. So by me hosting my family reunions, I started to dig deep and start to realize, okay, oh, now I understand why this relationship didn't work. Oh, this person was getting beat on. And I will always think, like, well, why did they stay? Or, you know, what gave them the courage to leave? And I commend women that that are in abusive relationships to leave, because I'm pretty sure it's probably not easy, and it could be a lot of factors on why you stay. But then when you make that big decision to leave, like, I commend you on that. So I don't know what that's like, but I can say that I do salute those that decide to leave. That's a big deal. And so I remember seeing all these things, and what people don't know, people can teach you things directly and they can teach you things indirectly. So based on what I witnessed, I will look at those things and say, hey, if that's love, like, by getting your ass kicked, that's something that I don't want. And so for me, growing up, I was like, listen, if I'm in a relationship with somebody, I don't want them to put their hands on me, because I'm going to just go off. And I had never experienced being abused in a relationship. I never experienced that. I got in fights with boys when I was in middle school, but I never was in an abusive relationship. But I remember one time, I was probably like, I think I was like 16 or 17. I was talking to my older brother, and I forgot how we got to this conversation. And this is when my niece was first born. And I remember him telling me, he was like, Sakina, he was like, did a guy ever put their hands on you? And I was like, no. And he would tell me, he was like, if a guy put their hands on you, that's a pistol smacking. But if he beat the shit out of you, that is a pistol shooting. Like, chitty chitty bang bang. Like, that's pretty much what he said. And I remember that. And so from that conversation moving forward, I will always remember that. Like, hey, like, if a dude put their hands on me, I'm going to tell my brothers, I'm going to tell my dad, I'm going to tell my grandfather, I'm going to tell all my uncles. And on my dad's side, I probably have like 11 uncles, just alone on my dad's side, like my dad brothers. Like, it's like 11 of them. So I was like, if I ever experience this, I know that I have somebody to call on. Now, don't get me wrong, there may be people in these situations where they have someone to call on, but they don't know what to say. So I get it. But I just know for me, I was like, yo, somebody put their hands on me, I'm calling my dad, I'm calling my brothers. I have 3 brothers. I have so many uncles on my mom's side and my dad's side. I'm calling my grandfather. And that is it. Like, I remember those things. And I used to think, like, hey, if that's love, I don't want it. I'd rather just be a career woman, just make money. And as I got older, I realized, like, hey, just because people that I know experiences these things, it doesn't mean that I'm going to experience the same thing. So I can make the life that I want for myself. Like, I can create that life and have boundaries and have non-negotiables and just stick to it. But yeah, I commend those that leave, and you're doing the best, not just for your kids, but also yourself. Also, another big thing, like, I realized, like, some people just have to unlearn. It's this idea about, you want to have kids before you're 30, right? And I understand some people's mindset on that, because, after 30, you could be high risk or whatever. But the thing that, and I stopped caring. At first, I used to care, like, oh my God, why are they, like, pressure me to have kids? And one thing people have to understand is that there's some people that just don't want kids. I have friends that don't want kids. I have friends that don't like kids. They can't stand kids. They don't want to be around kids. They don't want to be with someone that does have kids. So you have to be mindful. And some people have fertility issues where they're just unable to have kids as much as they want a child. And you just don't tell somebody, hey, you can just adopt. Like, some people want to go through that process themselves. Like, some people actually want to go through the process of, conceiving their own child without the adoption process. Although that is an option, like, some people want to just go through that themselves. And so I would hear people tell me, once I got out of law school, they was like, my family like, so it's time for you to have a kid. I'm like, listen, I'm 26 years old. Like, I'm not ready for that. And I knew for me, I did not want kids in my 20s. That was just my thing. Like, I didn't want kids in my 20s. I wanted to finish all of my schooling. I finished schooling by 28. I was like, that was it. I didn't want to have kids, like, in my 20s. My 20s was meant for me to finish school. And yes, you can have a child and still go to school. Yes, I get all that. But for me, that was just something I didn't want to do. Can it be done? Yes. I witnessed my friends have kids while they were in school and they finished. They did that. But for me, that wasn't the life that I wanted for myself. And so I stuck to that. And I would tell my family, like, hey, just because I graduated from school, it doesn't mean that I'm so ready to have a child right now. And they'll tell me, like, hey, you're never ready. I'm like, I get that, but I just knew the things that I wanted for myself. So they would tell me like, hey, you should have a kid right now. And one of the biggest things like I would hear, and I will always like say something like, if you have a kid, you could raise it on your own. I'm like, well, what the hell does that mean? Yeah, I get that, and I get that I could raise a kid by my own, but that's not the life that I wanted. Just because you have experienced that, and just because I experienced some of that as a child, it doesn't mean that I want that for my own life. I do want a husband. I do want to have a family unit. I want something that is healthy, mentally healthy on both parties. So I was like, why would you say that to somebody? Why would you just say, hey, you could raise it on your own? I get that, but men are needed too. Like, they are needed. They are so needed. And so as soon as I say that, it just trumps the conversation. I'm like, okay, I won. I'm not about to argue with you on that. One of the biggest things too that I had to realize that some people don't get, like the unlearning part, is about like therapy. Doesn't When you go to therapy, it doesn't mean that something is bad. Like, it doesn't mean like you're crazy. It doesn't mean like you are going through all this stuff. Like, it's a taboo in the black community that, hey, you only go to therapy when you're crazy. No, that's not true. Like, you can go to therapy for various reasons. And the one thing I even told my girlfriend the other day when we had a happy hour, I was like, you'd be surprised when you go to therapy. You come there for one thing, and then as you start talking to your therapist, they start taking off the layers. You realize, like, damn, I got some other shit that I really need to deal with. But you don't realize that until you go to therapy. And I told my friend, I was like, hey, like, you've never been to therapy, but the one thing I'm going to tell you, therapy works if you're willing to make it work. You have to put in the work. Like, it's one thing to say, hey, I want to go to therapy, but it doesn't mean anything if you're not trying to do the work. If your therapist is saying, like, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that, do that. But going to therapy, like, let's unlearn that. Like, therapy doesn't mean like you're crazy or there's something going on with you. Like, sometimes you need somebody to talk to, and you just can't go to church and put holy water on you, holy oil on you, and pray it off. Like, sometimes you need somebody to talk to. And I realized that, like, going to therapy, I just started talking to my therapist about other type of things, and not being afraid to just like have open dialogue with my family. Like, well, hey, I noticed this. Like, why do we do things like this? And I realized, like, even as a child, I would question things and realize just because someone is adult, that doesn't mean they're always correct. So let's change that. Like, some people would say, well, I'm doing this because I'm grown. Yeah, just because you're grown and whatever actions you're doing, it doesn't mean that it's right. So I'm that kid that say, hey, I know you older than me, but actions that you're doing is just not correct. And I was doing like, oh, you have a little smart mouth. No, I don't have a smart mouth. I'm just calling you out on something just doesn't seem right. And the one thing that I've learned too is that some things that we learned in our childhood doesn't mean that it's right. And just because your aunties and your uncles did it, or your grandma and your mom did it, or your great grandmother did it, if you're able to just sit back and just be fully aware, you realize, like, hey, there was some shit that I learned that it just doesn't make sense. Like, it just doesn't make sense at all. And you have to be that person to say, hey, I'm going to either let this pattern continue, or I'm going to be the person to say, hey, I don't want this. Like, I don't want this at all. And you can make that decision to say, hey, I want better for myself. So therapy is not a bad thing. You're not going there because you're crazy, but sometimes it's good to talk to somebody to just get some things off your chest. We all need someone to talk to. And sometimes that person that we may need to talk to, it may not be our mom, it may not be our dad, it may not be our friends. It just may be someone that's a neutral party that's able to look at things from a different perspective and say, hey, I think some things need to change, right? So that is something that's important. The next thing is, this is like my pet peeve. Like, this is like my pet peeve. Like, when people will say, if they don't know me, if you know me, it's fine. But if you don't know me, like, I guess like when the pandemic first, happened, like, DMs was popping. I was just getting like these weird messages. I'm like, okay, these people are freaking bored. Like, they're so bored. And one of my pet peeves when I would hear somebody say, oh, you're just so strong. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And maybe that's the lawyer in me, because I'm like, well, I don't know how you're defining strong, but what does that mean? You're looking at a picture of me and you're saying I'm strong. You don't know nothing about me. So what does it mean when you say I'm strong and you don't know me? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. People that do know me know my strength. They knew what I endured, and they knew how I was able to overcome those things. But when people don't know me and say, hey, Sakina, I think you're really strong, I'm like, well, what does that mean? I don't get it. Now, do I respect myself? Yes. I'm not going to let somebody else disrespect me. Yeah, I'm not going to let that happen. But how do you say that I'm strong and you don't know me? And I know, like, when I was in the hospital 5 years ago for my pulmonary embolism, there's even statistics that show that doctors will not give women like pain medicine because they think they can endure it. And I experienced that when I was in the hospital. They gave me a Percocet to ease the pain, and I was fine. And it was like, well, we can't give you that. I'm like, what does that mean? And I was in pain. Like, I was in pain. I would keep pushing a button in the hospital, like, hey, somebody help me. Like, I need some type of medicine. But they were hesitant to give me some. Like, well, I'm not sure if you're going to, if you're going to get addicted to this. I'm like, man, listen, if I got to get high today to calm this pain, let me get high off these perks because I need it. But they were hesitant to give me pain medicine because they just assumed that, hey, I can endure it. Like, who does that? Like, who does that? And the one thing that I had to learn too, and we actually talked about this in my like women's happy hour, about this idea of being strong, especially those that come from single parent households. And when your mother is the person in the household, you're taught to be strong. You're taught to say, hey, you're able to just handle anything and you don't need help. And you experience that. And because you experience that, you may allow that to become your, like, a part of who you are. And one of my girlfriends said that, like, I grew up, my mom was a single mother. I knew what it's like to be strong, and I realized, like, hey, I don't need nobody. I could do this shit by myself. Like, I don't need nobody. And that's easy to say because that's what you experience. And I told her, I was like, you know what? Like, sis, like, I've been in that same predicament, but I realized as I got older and I was able to witness healthy relationships, like, I can do it by myself, but I don't want to. Like, I can support myself. Yeah, I can do that. But I believe in partnership. That's what I believe in. So I believe that we are better together. Yeah, I can do all this and that by myself, but I believe in healthy partnership. And just because we didn't come from that, it doesn't mean that we can't create it. Like, we could create that ourselves. And I said, you just got to be around positive people. You got to be around healthy relationship where you're able to see that, hey, you can have a man in the house and you can see their role in the house. But sometimes when you grow up and a woman is all you don't even consider a man's role. That's for some people. For me, even though I experienced just having, my mother being a single mother, as I got older, we did have a stepdad, and I was able to see that. And I'm like, hey, like, that's something I do want when I'm ready to have it. Like, that's something I do want. But I'm not going to allow, the times where we're just me, my brothers, and my mother in the house, just say, hey, that's it. As long as there's a woman in the house, I'm fine. No, a man's role is definitely needed. So if you're a king out there, just know that you are needed, king, and you are dope. So just know that. So yeah, just being strong. That's not, I don't understand. Like, when people say that, like, what does that actually mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And one of the things too, I will say this about being strong. This somewhat ties into it. My dad was my pandemic partner. My dad was staying with me this year, and we had a lot of conversations. And he told me about his experience about my grandmother being a single mother and the things that he experienced. And he knew how strong she was, about the things that she endured. And we would have conversations about relationships. Like, my dad is that person where that's like, if I look at my mom and dad, my dad is the parent that gives me my emotional support. Like, my dad is the person that I can cry to, and he's there. Like, I can, like, lean on his shoulder and just break down crying, and he gets me. He understands. My mom, yeah, but my mom she's in battle mode. So if I tell her somebody's bothering me, she wants to beat them up. Like, she's always in battle mode. Like, who is it? What's this person's name? What's their number? My dad, he more so wants to like take me off the high horse, make me calm, and then say, okay, what happened? Who did it? What can I do? That's my dad. And so we talk about these things about being strong, and he'll talk to me about relationships, and he'll tell me about the things like he has done wrong in relationships. And the one thing he will always tell me, he will say, what's their sign? TJ, we could talk after this. I'm not sure what you mean by your question. And my dad will say, he would just come out the blue. We'll talk about relationships. Like, me and my dad have a good relationship. We're able to talk about, like, everything. Like, we're able to talk about all type of stuff. Some things you think, like, hey, you can't talk to your dad about. Like, I'm able to talk to my dad. And, okay. I'm able to talk to my dad and my grandfather about, like, relationship. Like, I'm able to have these conversations, and they allow me to vent. They allow me to like express myself, even if I had to use profanity. Like, they are there. Like, the Philly comes out, and I'm able to say, listen, this happened. But the one thing, like, my dad, and I would tell you, as a woman, like, when your dad lives in your house, it's a little different, right? And my dad would talk to me and say, he would like, hey, remember that no man is perfect. I'm like, Dad, I get that. And the things that I had to unlearn is that, hey, like, even though I was able to witness some things I didn't like, I was hearing things, like, I would hear women say, like, men ain't shit. And I could believe that if I want to, but I realized, like, hey, like, that's your experience. And you're not going to place your experiences and your fears on me. Like, they're not going to paralyze me. And just because you had a bad experience, that doesn't mean that I'm going to have a bad experience either. So I'm going to make the decision and say, hey, I'm going to choose what's best for me. And my dad would tell me these things. My dad would tell me the messed up relationships that he had. He would tell me about, hey, I wish I had a chance to treat your mom better. We would talk about these things, and he would say, no man is perfect. But the biggest question that he asked me about living here, he was like, why you don't bring nobody around? And I was like, wait a minute, Dad, what? Why don't you bring anybody around? I know you seeing somebody, but why don't you bring somebody around? Like, I need to see this. And growing up, I lived with my aunt and uncle in high school, and my uncle was the one that was like screening guys, like, hey, nope. Like, that was the man that I introduced people to. And I told my dad, I said, Dad, it's a little different when your father lives with you. And I said, one, I'll be honest, I said, I don't have a lot of traffic. Like, having traffic in my house, that's just not it. So you're not going to see, like, so many people come in, whether it's a man or friends. I just don't like a lot of people in my space. So let me just be clear on that. The only time there may be people in my space if I'm having a cookout or there's, like, a family dinner. But other than that, no. But I said, Dad, you don't have to worry about, like, this is not like a whorehouse. Like, I'm not having, like, men coming in and out at my house. So that's one thing you're not going to see. And I told him, I said, Dad, but, I have respect for you as a man. So I said, I'm not just going to bring anybody here to be in your presence, whether I introduce you to them or not. Like, I'm not going to just bring somebody in here. Like, that's just not for me. And he was looking like, I understand, Mama. That's my nickname, Mama. He was like, I understand. And the thing that I told him, I said, Dad, I looked him right in the eye, and I said, Dad, listen, I understand I'm your daughter, you want the best for me, but I said, listen, I'm not going to ever, I'm not going to ever let some fuck nigga shake your hand. So I said, if there's a man around, just know that he's cool. And I said, if you peep something that I don't peep, if I bring somebody around, tell me, because I'm going to say something. And he, like had his hands up, like, God, thank you. Thank you. I'm doing something right with my daughter. But that meant a lot to me. But, I had to, learn some stuff. And I was able to talk to my dad. And, having my dad heal, it helped me heal things that I thought didn't need to be healed. Like, there were some wounds that I needed to be healed. And my dad helped me with that. And I appreciate that. And I've learned a lot from my dad. Like, my dad is like an OG. Like, I'm able to talk to him about anything. So I'm very, very grateful for those things. And I've learned that there's some women that's in my family that's bitter, and I was like, hey, I don't want that. Like, I like to be soft, like to be all those type of things. And when it comes to being strong, when people tell me that, I'm like, yeah, I can endure things, but I still hurt. I still cry. Um, I can be strong, and I could also be soft. Like, I could be soft. Like, I would hear like lyrics to a song like real ass bitch give a fuck about a nigga. Like, no, I'm not gonna sing that part in the song. I'm not gonna sing that part because I do love black men. I do love black men. I'm not rude. I mean, there's a time and place where I would check somebody, yeah. But I was like, no, I'm not rude. Like, hey, I still like flowers. Like, I still like holding hands. Like, I still enjoy telling the man, like, hey, they are amazing. I will still buy gifts just because. And I would talk to my male friends. They're like, yeah, this person, she will only buy me a gift for my birthday. I'm like, oh, so you never got like treated out to dinner? It's like, no. I was like, oh well, I do that. Like, hey, if you accomplish something, hey, I'm gonna brag about you. I'm like, hey, let's go out and get a drink, or let's go out and get something to eat. Or if I see something that somebody likes, like, hey, I'm gonna pick it up just because. Doesn't mean it's their birthday, but hey, I thought about you. And so those are things like, I talk to my dad about. I'm like, hey, and he's like, Mama, you're on the right track. I'm like, thanks, Dad. And the last thing I want to say is, and I actually talked about this Saturday, and it's about, being gay. And the one thing that I've learned, and this is the conversation I had, one of my cousin's best friends, she's like family to me. And she told me, she said, it took me a while to come out. And she was like, it didn't take me a while because I was embarrassed about my sexuality. Like, I knew I liked girls for a very long time. But she said, my biggest thing was I never wanted my mom to think because I'm gay, she did something wrong. And I was like, wow, I never thought about it like that. She was like, yeah, I just never wanted my mom to think that she did something wrong with my upbringing. Like, she did the best that she could. And I'm here to say that, just because there's someone in your family that's gay, that doesn't mean that their parents did anything wrong. Like, the heart wants what the heart wants. Like, you love who you want to love. And your parents didn't do anything wrong. You just made a decision, if you're a woman, to love another woman. If you're a man, you made a decision to love another man. It doesn't mean that your parents did something wrong. And some people really think that. I know there's some people out there that have gay children and they still can't accept them. And my heart goes out to the kids. So if you're gay, like, just know, like, your parents didn't do anything wrong. Like, you love who you love, and that's okay. And lastly, as I like close this out, one of the things I had to unlearn too is that, my pain, there's purpose in my pain, and things I experience, like, those are my experiences. I even told my dad, I said, Dad, Dad, I'm not perfect at all. I said, it doesn't matter how many degrees I got, how many awards I got. I still make mistakes in relationships. I can look at some relationships and say, hey, that was my fault. And I can look at relationships and say, damn, like, they did me wrong. Like, I can honestly say that. And I said, what I can say is that the relationships that were bad, I would never blame you because you were not in my household. Like, I would never say, hey, I decided to date this guy because my dad wasn't there. Like, I don't have daddy issues. Like, I don't have that. And so I told my dad, I said, I would never put the blame on you. Like, the decisions that I made, they are my decisions, and I own that. The mistakes that I made, I own that. I would never blame my mother. I would not blame my father. I would not blame my other family members. Like, I made those decisions. And sometimes it's easy to point the finger at people, and I realize, like, hey, like, that's on me. Like, if I made a mistake, that is on me. And the biggest thing as I close is that the thing that I had to realize, and hopefully you can unlearn this too, like, just because people in your family had bad experiences, whether it was with relationships, whether it was with jobs, or whatever, it doesn't mean that that's going to be your future. You can create the future that you want for yourself. And the biggest thing is that, people got opinions. Everybody has opinions, and opinions are like assholes. Everybody has it, but don't let somebody's opinion affect the way you live. Like I would tell people, like, sometimes when people say something to me, I'm like, oh wow, you really feel that way? Oh, that hurts. Now I'm just like, honestly, I give two shits what you have to say. Like I told my father, like we'll talk about things. I'm like honestly, Dad, like I don't like your family member. Like I can't stand this person. And he's like, oh well, why don't you? I said, this person always got something to say. I said, I just don't like this person. Like I'm very honest and I'm very vocal about that. And I just got to the point and I realized like, hey, everybody has opinions. Don't let nobody's opinion affect you. Live the life that you want to live, whatever that life may look like. Create the life that you want. Hey, if you want to go outside and walk around naked and that makes you happy, man, do that. You only have one life, and so live it. And the thing that I realized, like, hey, like create the life that you want. And just because you didn't come from certain things doesn't mean that you can't create it. Like I tell myself this all the time. Like my vision board, it speaks volumes. Like I believe in love. I still believe that. And even though we live in this generation when everybody wants to be cold and some women want to act like men, no, I'm not going to act like that. I'm not going to let this generation make me think differently about the things that I desire and the things that I want. No, I still believe in love. I still believe in healthy love. Like I still believe in marriage. I still believe in those things. And even though there's crazy stuff on TV, there's crazy stuff on social media, I'm not going to let that affect how I feel, because I know the things that I want, it is out there and it does exist. I don't need social media to make it seem like I got this perfect life. I just believe in being positive. Even when I have bad days, and God knows I have bad days, like I believe in just being positive, not doing things for the gram. I am not this person that has all this money. One day I will. But right now, I'm going to read my Bible, I'm going to read these affirmations, and I'm going to manifest everything that I want. But you don't see me like posting things about, hey, I just purchased this. I don't have it like that. One day I will, but I don't have it like that. But I just learned like, hey, I'm just going to create the life that I want. It's going to upset people, but honestly, I just really don't give a damn. Like, I just don't care. But this vision board behind me, like my happiness, I control that. Some people will say, like, this person makes me happy. No, this person adds to my happiness. I believe in making my happiness, that is on me. That is on me. Nobody else. Being happy, owning who you are, being confident in who you are, that's important. It's not about the woman that has a dress, but it's the woman that's wearing a dress. And let me tell you, whether I have a dress on, whether I have a suit on, whether I have yoga pants, I wear that shit. And I own it, and I'm proud of myself. But at one point, I wasn't confident. So I had to unlearn that, like, hey, I am beautiful. Regardless of anything I have went through, I am beautiful. But I didn't think that at one point in my life, in my younger years. But now, oh, this right here, I own all of that. And you are too. You are beautiful. You are amazing. You are remarkable. You are spectacular. Never let somebody tell you differently. But if you look back over your life, I want you to look at some things and realize, hey, the things that you learned, are they healthy? Are they helping you now in your adulthood? And some of the problems that we deal with now is things that we struggle with in our childhood. I'm here to tell you, like, hey, you can heal that inner child. And just because you didn't go to therapy in your early years doesn't mean you can't make the decision now to go to therapy. I went to therapy in January, and I think that was one of the best decisions I have ever made in my life. Do I wish I had a chance to go back when I was younger? Yeah, but life happens, and I had to experience some things. I had to deal with some pain, and that pain turned to purpose, and I realized, like, hey, I want better for myself. So you can make that decision now and say, hey, I want better for myself. You can look back over your life and realize, hey, there's some things that I've learned, and they just don't seem right. Like, you could be a strong woman. You can also be soft. And you can also be strong and still desire to have a man. You don't have to say, hey, I don't need no man. You ain't gonna never hear me say that. No, I love a man. Like, I need that in my life. I would not say, hey, I don't need a man. Like, no. I'm not gonna say that. So just make the decision and say, hey, there's some things I would like to unlearn. And you can make that decision for yourself. I hope that you have an amazing Monday. I hope that you never forget how amazing and how dope you are. This is Monday, so for my man crush, Monday goes to all the dope men out there. Like, hey, you are amazing, you are great. Never forget how amazing you are. You have feelings, you have emotions, and you are entitled to feel exactly how you feel. Never let somebody make you feel less of a man. You are dope, you are great, you are handsome, you are phenomenal. And I pray for everybody else for their Monday is great. I pray that the remainder of your weekend is awesome. Thank you guys again and have a good Monday.